The bottom panel of the craft opened. Two strange-looking beings exited the craft. One of the creatures made a hand motion indicating for the technicians to enter the craft. One of the MPs pointed his rifle, an M16 rifle, at the creature and motioned for it to come with him. There's no way that the military policemen could have detained these two creatures. They tried. Hello, my name is Richard Doty. I'm a former intelligence officer with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. This presentation is going to explain what happened at Stallion Range in New Mexico. Stallion Range is a top secret radar facility located in northern White Sands Test Range, New Mexico. Stallion Range is the entrance into Trinity Site. Trinity Site was a location where the first atomic bomb was tested by the United States Army in Los Alamos Laboratory in 1945. Stallion Range contains a classified ground-to-air laser system that is used to blind passing foreign satellites. Now, this isn't classified anymore. Was for many, many, many years. The location and the duties and the operations at Stallion Range was highly classified. But over the years, the information has leaked out. Books have been written about this. People have lectured about this laser system that we developed to blind Soviet satellites back in the Cold War era that were passing over the United States. And Stallion Range was one of these facilities, one of many facilities that contain these types of lasers that was able to blind the satellites as they were flying over to keep the Soviets from photographing highly classified things on the ground. Detachment 1 Space Surveillance Squadron was located at the Stallion Range. That was operated by the United States Air Force. Detachment 1 was a part of a number of detachments that operated remote radar locations around the world. Headquarters for this operation was at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. Stallion Range is 18 miles east of Socorro, New Mexico. Now, some of you can remember what happened or the history of Socorro, New Mexico when it pertained to 𝗪𝗓𝗪𝗓. The incident that happened on April 24th, 1964, when 𝗪𝗓𝗪𝗓, a police officer with the Socorro Police Department, observed a craft that landed southeast of the city of Socorro. He went to investigate this craft, which was at the time a UFO that landed. He saw two occupants get out of the craft, and he saw and recorded the marking on the outside of the craft. This led to the 𝗪𝗓𝗪𝗓 incident of April of 1964. It was thoroughly investigated by the United States government, specifically the United States Air Force. Project Blue Book investigators arrived at scene. Personnel from Kirtland Air Force Base arrived at scene. And one of the people that arrived and did a follow-up investigation, his name was Major Edward Doty. Yes, you heard that right. Major Edward Doty, my uncle. Now, the 𝗪𝗓𝗪𝗓 case wasn't the only case that the Project Blue Book investigators looked into around Socorro. There were other cases that were less known, such as the Bingham, New Mexico case. Now, Bingham, New Mexico is northeast of Stallion Range on New Mexico Highway 380. It's a very, very, very small community, only contained a few dozen people. But in 1958, a UFO landed there, right in the road. The only person that actually saw the UFO land was the New Mexico Highway Department personnel, who was checking for debris on the road surface. He reported to his supervisor in Socorro and eventually to the New Mexico State Police, who contacted the Air Force, and it was reported. A document was made, a small report in Project Blue Book. But over the years, there's been many other sightings that occurred around New Mexico Highway 380, which runs from Socorro past Stallion Range, past Northern White Sands Test Range, past Bingham, all the way to Carrizozo, New Mexico. In August 1982, 2 airmen assigned to the Stallion Range radar site as technicians observed a UFO land near the outer building to the radar site. This was in the late summer of 1982. It was during daylight hours. These 2 technicians were sent to repair some equipment. And while they were outside, they saw this UFO come in and land. The 2 technicians immediately notified the radar site command center. The command center advised the UFO was on their radar screen, traveling from the west, but they lost it, the UFO, over the radar site because the UFO had landed. The 2 technicians observed the UFO swirl on the ground before coming to rest adjacent to a maintenance building. The bottom panel of the craft opened. 2 strange-looking beings exited the craft. Now, these are words that came from the technicians. They were thoroughly interviewed, and what I'm telling you is their description of what they saw. The creatures were described as 4 foot tall, thin appearance, wearing a helmet, with a long tube connected to a tank on their back. The creatures had arms and legs. The creatures moved their arms in several different motions, apparently trying to communicate with the technicians. What the technicians said was they were trying to make hand signals, moving their hands back and forth. The technicians spoke English to the creatures. The creatures didn't seem to understand the technicians. One of the technicians spoke Spanish, but the creatures, again, didn't understand the language and didn't respond. One of the creatures produced a long cylinder from its suit. The creature moved towards the technicians with the cylinder, attempting, the technicians thought, to give this cylinder to the technicians. Fearing that the object might be radioactive or a weapon, the technicians refused to accept the cylinder. One of the creatures made a hand motion indicating for the technicians to enter the craft, motioning towards the craft in a gesture that the technicians thought meant for them to walk inside the craft. At this point, the technicians radioed to the command center to send help to their location. 2 Air Force military policemen arrived, both carrying a handgun and rifle. The standard weapons worn by Air Force security police personnel or military police was a .38 revolver, 6-shot, and an M16 rifle, which contained a magazine with normally 20 rounds in it. And what the military policemen were trying to do was challenge the creatures, which would be typical of military police. Identify yourself, keep your hands in the air, things like that. But the creatures didn't seem to understand anything that the MPs were doing or saying. One of the creatures walked to the senior MP and attempted to grab his arm. The MP pulled away aggressively. This appeared to scare the creatures. Now, you have to put yourself in the military policeman's shoes. These creatures weren't human looking. This happened in a very classified area. These MPs are highly trained to protect Air Force resources, especially top secret resources. So they were on their probably highest state of alert. And these creatures, non-humans, couldn't understand anything that these military police were saying or trying to do. One of the MPs pointed his rifle, an M16 rifle, at the creature and motioned for it to come with him, moving the rifle in a manner which meant, "You come with me." The creature didn't understand. Both creatures then returned to their craft. Panel closed and the craft took off towards the southwest. The creatures left the cylinder on the ground. Now, here we are in a situation where there was a confrontation between US military personnel and extraterrestrials. We didn't know, or the military personnel didn't know, the intentions of these extraterrestrials. You got to understand that these military personnel, even though they're highly trained, probably were extremely scared too. They were confronting something that they've never seen before. They didn't know what the creature's intentions were. Were they hostile? Why did they land in a top secret facility? And as one of the military policemen told us later, his first impression was, could these really be Russian personnel or Soviet deep cover operatives flying in some strange craft into a top secret facility to attack it, to steal something, or just obtain intelligence? Now, I know that's kind of out there for some people to believe, but you understand that if you're put in a situation like the military policemen were put into, all sorts of things probably ran through your mind. And what their main concern at this point was the cylinder that was left on the ground. There's no way that the military policemen could have detained these two creatures. They tried. They tried to have them come with them, but the creatures didn't. They returned to their craft, and while they were returning to the craft, the military policemen didn't attempt to stop them. They didn't fire any shots, but the creatures got in the craft and left. But again, they left that cylinder on the ground. Now, there's all sorts of things that went through the military policemen's minds. What was this cylinder? Was it a weapon? Was it an explosive? Was it some kind of ray gun? The two MPs went to the command post, informed the commander on duty, a captain, of what happened. And so they immediately then, the command post personnel immediately notified the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. The closest OSI office during that time period would have been Kirtland Air Force Base, some 2 hours away. So eventually OSI agents responded to Stallion Range. The two MPs and the two technicians were interviewed separately. All found the men's reports to be accurate as far as truthfulness. The senior MP reported that when the UFO took off, he noticed that the cylinder left behind glowed. Further examination revealed that there was some sort of a crystal in the center of the cylinder that was glowing. And when the senior MP saw that, and when he went back to the command post, he thought that the command post should immediately notify the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Personnel, or EOD, the bomb team, so to speak, of the Air Force. Again, that was some hours away. Kirtland Air Force Base would have been the closest base for response. All four men were examined by medical personnel later at the Kirtland Air Force Base Hospital, which was in Albuquerque. All four men had a small quantity of radioactive alpha particles in their hair. Other than that, the men were not suffering from any ill effects of the contact. Now, what is alpha particles? alpha is a form of radiation. Alpha particles form a radiation. And it's particles. It's not rays, it's particles. Alpha particles are easily repelled by the skin. If you get some on you, you can wash them off. They don't enter or permeate the skin. So it wouldn't have hurt them. The only way you can be harmed by alpha particles is if you ingest them or breathe them. All four men signed a non-disclosure agreement regarding this incident, which was classified as top secret. The cylinder was left on the ground. A perimeter was made around the cylinder so no one could enter and touch the cylinder. OSI personnel went out and took photographs of the cylinder from a distance, but they noticed it was still glowing. So when the explosive ordnance disposal personnel arrived on scene, they immediately detected some form of radiation on that cylinder. But they also considered it to be a hostile device or an explosive device. Now that's what explosive ordnance disposal personnel are supposed to do. They followed their policies and procedures in dealing with this. One of the EOD technicians, dressed in a bomb suit, and over that bomb suit was a radiation suit, he went up and they x-rayed it. They x-rayed the device without touching it. They also scanned it with a radiation detector to determine whether there's any isotopes being detected from the cylinder. When they went back and developed the x-ray, looked at it, they realized that their x-ray machine, which is a portable x-ray machine, couldn't penetrate the device, and therefore they couldn't have x-rayed what was inside. They also detected alpha radiation, which was similar to the radiation that was detected in the hair of the technicians and the MPs. So the EOD technicians decided to go ahead and fire a small charge into this to see if it would detonate. Now that's another standard procedure, thinking if it was an explosive device, firing a small explosive charge into it would cause it to explode. Well, when they tried to do that with what the EOD technicians called a disruptor, the round that was fired into it, explosive round, never penetrated the cylinder. It just moved the cylinder across the desert. Eventually, the EOD brought in a containment vessel, picked up the cylinder, placed it in a containment vessel, and then they transported it to the Los Alamos laboratories through Sandia National Laboratories. Now that meant that they took it to Kirtland Air Force Base, where Sandia National Laboratories was located. Sandia National Laboratories technicians did a cursory inspection of the cylinder, not feeling it was anything radioactive, but couldn't understand anything about the cylinder. They couldn't detect what the cylinder was made of, the materials. So then they decided to transport the cylinder to the Los Alamos National Laboratories in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Once it arrived at Los Alamos National Laboratories, it was again thoroughly examined by the Los Alamos National Laboratories. And Los Alamos had advanced equipment to thoroughly examine this. The device was made of an unknown material and plastic-like material. A window was contained in the center portion of the device. A crystal-looking object was in the center. The device did not contain any screws, bolts, external knobs. The device weighed 2.5 pounds and measured 40 centimeters long. When a voice was spoken in close proximity to the device, the center, or the crystal portion, glowed. Scientists then reasoned the device was a universal translator. Now you think back to what happened at Stallion Range near this top secret facility. These extraterrestrials pulled out this cylinder, pointed it towards the technicians, and wanting the technicians to speak into it in order for that device to translate English into whatever language the ETs were speaking. And they didn't, because the technicians and the MPs didn't know what this thing was. I mean, I think most people would probably have done the same thing, as being scared of this device and being frightful that it could be some kind of a weapon. The scientists at Los Alamos also determined the crystal in the center of the device was probably a mini computer. Scientists tested the device in several different languages, but could not get the device to work, probably because the device had to be activated by the alien language. Scientists surmised that the alien language must be used to turn on the device, which they couldn't do. The device was stored at Los Alamos National Laboratories for safekeeping. Now, this incident was classified for the longest time. And in 1999, one of the technicians came forth. He'd gotten out of the Air Force. He attended the UFO convention. He approached Wendell Stevens, Lieutenant Colonel, retired Air Force, and told him the story. Well, unbeknownst to Wendell Stevens, the OSI investigator that thoroughly investigated that incident was no other than Richard Doty, me. I was the OSI agent in charge of investigating this incident. I was there, I spoke to the technicians, and I spoke to the military police, along with the people inside the command post who saw this object come in on radar. So I was the one that authored the report. I was the one that spoke with EOD, Sandia Labs personnel, and Los Alamos personnel about this device. Now jump to 2022. I had a telephone conversation with a person within the Department of Defense Inspector General's office some weeks ago. He wanted to talk about this incident, which he said was still classified. What I knew wasn't classified. Although he didn't tell me the author of this report, when he started talking about the report, I immediately knew it was my report. When I told him that it was my report and that it should be declassified, he said it wasn't. But he said the report that he got was still redacted. This is supposed to be the disclosure era within the government. But that's obviously, there isn't a disclosure. Offices and agencies within the government's not cooperating with each other. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation on the Stallion Range incident of 1982. Google it, see what you can find yourself. Until next time, I'm Richard Doty. Thank you.
If you liked this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.